Hello, my name is Alexa MacGregor. This is my Capstone project implementation and reflection presentation for my Social and Emotional Learning Foundations course with Professor Erin Bruno. And that's a picture of me at senior sunrise with my students. So I'll begin with my personal reflection on my SEL practices. The SEL practice that I selected and tried is modeling self-regulation. And that's the area of improvement that arose after completing the story of self assignment that I chose to focus on. And I believe that's as equally critical for students as well, which I'll get more in depth with shortly. My personal plan for the implementation of my SEL practices was to have decompression sessions with my new colleagues at Tioga High School every week, in which we laugh and reflect on our weekly successes or not so successful lessons. And I will do my own personal reflection daily to monitor my own stressors and my own adult SEL progress. I also plan to send weekly positive emails or calls home to affirm students as they make their own SEL and or academic progress. So I believe I was fairly successful at implementing my personal practices plan. My colleagues and I are still doing weekly decompression sessions for our adult SEL, and I do my own personal reflections. The positive calls and emails home are happening bi-weekly since I've ended up losing my prep time and I'm inundated with after-school activities and field trips as of late, since we have two teachers, one of which is our teaching principal, on maternity leave. What was my experience? Was I able to give myself permission to focus on my own social and emotional growth and well-being? I believe so. I've given myself permission to focus on my own emotions and my overall wellness, as that was my area for improvement. I found it freeing, and I am a better teacher, wife, daughter, etc., because I am taking care of myself as well. I learned through this process about my social and emotional competence that, like everyone, I'm a work in progress and I'm continuing to learn to process my emotions in healthier ways. I do believe I'm on the right track now in being able to stay calm under pressure without bottling up my emotions indefinitely till they inevitably overflow. And usually in angry tears. So how might I sustain these practices beyond the course if appropriate? I do plan to continue my personal social emotional learning beyond this course, as it does make me a better person and a better educator, regulating my own emotions in particular. I just think it makes me a better all-around person. An adult SEL is so seldom addressed that it was refreshing that we got to focus on that for a significant part of the course. I think it's critical to retaining teachers today as well as to student learning. So I'll move on to my class-wide SEL practices reflection. And for this area, I chose to focus on implementing cooperative learning activities and listening skills for academic discussion on a daily basis based on the assets inventory data that I collected. My plan was to implement daily academic discussion opportunities and cooperative learning activities at least 3 times per week. I did implement a weekly reflective check-in using Google Forms and collected data from students each week as we learned together to monitor their progress. The next question is to what degree I was able to successfully implement my classroom practices plan that I just discussed. And I believe again that I was very successful at implementing discussion opportunities daily, the cooperative learning activities 3 times per week, and a weekly reflective check-in. As far as what went well, my daily discussion increased the depth of my student learning. They were able to have rich conversation about the texts and topics that we were learning about. The cooperative learning at least 3 times a week established a student-centered learning environment, and it really shared the responsibility with students for their own learning. And the weekly check-in gave all students a voice to direct their own learning, particularly my introverts who maybe don't speak up as much when we are discussing as a class. They're not going to volunteer their feedback, so eliciting it from them in a silent way can sometimes work well for those students that aren't as vocal about their needs. So as far as what was challenging or what went less well, I think my area of focus on discussion and collaboration was successful, but I also need to remember to address the needs of my quieter, more introverted students that crave those independent learning opportunities as well. So it's all about finding that balance. So did anything unexpected happen? Well, a few students did not take my weekly check-ins on Google Forms seriously, and you'll see some evidence of that shortly. And it wasn't so much that it's unexpected, just it was maybe an unfavorable response here and there. But as I did them each week, there were less of those I don't knows or I don't know how to answer that kind of responses as they got more comfortable being vulnerable and sharing what they do in fact need from me as their teacher. So building that confidence to speak up and advocate for themselves, I think it just takes time and practice. So just reiterating that I am here truly to listen to their needs and what, and to make changes based on their feedback, and them seeing those changes happen, immediately. They did grow and were able to reflect in deeper ways in those check-ins and take them more seriously. So week 4 next week, we'll see. Well, not next week, but first week of December, we'll see how that goes. So as far as that evidence I mentioned earlier, you'll see some Google form responses with student feedback here from the first week. So this is some of the data that I collected regarding my SEL practices. So my first question was, what do you think is going well as far as building our classroom community? And what they said was there's more quiet class discussions on topics, more free time would also make it go well. Working together, I don't know, to be honest. If everyone learned to shut up, more free time, getting our work done faster, quieter and less overwhelming to be in, being able to work well with each other. The next question I asked was, how could we improve the experience of being in class together? Activities with partners or groups, I think it's going well. I don't know how to answer that. We're all working together and most of us are passing. We're all becoming friends. Yeah, we're all getting to know each other and I think it's going okay. So a variety of responses in these snapshots, not necessarily all of them, but just wanted to share some of my student responses with you. So what is not going so well? Individual work, people talking, not understanding. I don't know, I don't talk to 98% of the class. The work, nothing I can't think of. It's loud sometimes. The noise, amount of people is overwhelming, which is a little bit funny. We're in a very small school of about 55 kids at Tioga High School. And in my math class, which is where I collected this data from for this project, I have 28 of those 55. So they're used to classes of about 10 to 15 and sometimes only like 3 to 5 depending on the subject. And I think it's funny that they think it's a big class since I used to teach in the Valley and would regularly have classes of 35 to 38. Anyway, we're all improving. We're all works in progress. So as far as more reflection on that evidence and what I took away from implementing these practices, I do adopt a continuous improvement mindset as an educator. As I said previously, actually just momentarily ago, I am a work in progress just like my students, so I try to live and teach by the growth mindset like many of us do. Did I make any changes, shifts, or improvements as a result of my growth mindset and my observations? Definitely. Adapting to the ever-changing needs of our students is critical. I do make changes on a daily, sometimes hourly, sometimes minute-by-minute basis, depending on the moods of my students and myself. Their readiness for learning is so important, and sometimes substituting a fun activity before the next chapter or the more difficult content, input plus one, is needed. So sometimes they need a quiet, independent day where they're writing or reading more on their own. So I am continuing to improve on striking that balance between collaborative and independent learning opportunities as a result of that feedback from my students. How did my students experience the practices? My students really enjoyed sharing the responsibility for learning, and especially love when I turn it over to them completely for project-based learning, or even just for the day with like an equation maze in math where they're going around they solve a problem and it sends them to another problem, or if they get one wrong, it sends them back to a previous problem and they have to adjust. It allows me as a teacher to flit around the room and support my strugglers, and to, help facilitate their learning rather than being the sole show, if you know what I mean, with direct instruction. I usually keep that short for instructions, and sometimes there's heavy days where I have to, do the slides and the notes, but not all the time. And I try to balance that with those discussion opportunities and those collaborative activities that engage students. And I think that's when they're engaged, they're enjoying learning. It's sort of like tricking them into learning on a daily basis. So did I observe any changes among my students from implementing the selected practices I mentioned? Yes, I'm starting to see changes in students, but it's too short of a time to really measure solid evidence of that impact. But one example I'll share is that one of my extremely anxious students that struggles in math, she aced her quiz last Friday, but I don't think that's necessarily a consistent change in her academic performance just yet, but I can definitely see attributing that to building her confidence with partner and small group learning before that quiz. So that SEL in tandem with her academic progress being having that impact, which was awesome. Hopefully I continue to see more and more of that going forward. Will I continue to use these practices? I will definitely continue to incorporate daily academic discussion, those cooperative learning activities, and a weekly check-in. Getting that valuable feedback from students on where to go next and how best to address their needs is just informing my instruction, and I appreciate it. So did I learn anything about myself as a practitioner and my social and emotional competence through implementing these practices? I did learn that I need to balance that collaboration with independent learning for my introverts, which is ironic because I am naturally an introvert too. I've had to become an extroverted introvert as a teacher, and the needs of introverts can often be overlooked as discussed in some of the research and videos during the course. So my overall reflection, part C here. What new understandings about SEL did I gain, if any? I now understand how important adult SEL is in relation to that of our students and how often it is neglected. And in what ways was it beneficial or not to intentionally focus on my personal and class-wide practices at the same time? I think it was incredibly beneficial because focusing on my adult SEL gave me the mental tools, the capacity to deal with my students' emotional needs, social emotional needs. And did I notice any ways that my personal practice influenced my class-wide practices or vice versa? Regulating my own emotions and processing them in healthy ways just makes me a better teacher. So what are the implications of the Capstone project in this class, if any, for my personal growth as an educator? The Capstone in this course truly did help me grow as a person and as a teacher and educator, with improving my ability to process my emotions. I'm much healthier emotionally, mentally, and physically than I was a year ago, which I believe makes me a better teacher overall. As far as my professional practice, the Capstone in this class helped me develop my professional practice in multiple ways. Building numerous academic discussion opportunities and cooperative learning enhanced my students' learning overall. And those weekly check-ins developed a shared ownership of student learning as well and built their metacognition skills. What would I like to try next? What are my next steps, my action steps? I'd like to focus on incorporating structured independent learning opportunities to ensure I'm balancing out the collaborative learning. My action steps entail bringing back independent choice reading and building my classroom library with books that teens actually want to read. My action steps also include silent independent writing time for warm-ups and exit tickets when appropriate and before discussing and sharing out. So like a timed 10-minute writing. And that's my presentation. Thank you so much for listening, I should say. Hope this helps someone. Thank you.